Unfortunately for you, and neither Mark or myself are Michael Easton. It's an issue of quality over quantity for you today, I'm afraid. It's with two rather than one. My name is Will Frost, and I'm the Public Affairs Advisor for Globus Group. And this is Mark.
This is working.
Yeah. So our Head of Healthcare. So today I wanted to think a bit about the future of PPE. And although Globus makes a full range of PPE from hard hats, gloves, and clothing, we're going to focus on masks because it's really about some of the lessons of the pandemic, which are obviously very much focused on masks. But before I do that, I want to just think about. I'm going to just think about learn some of the lessons of the past. Look to see about some of the things we can think about making things better for the future. What should the future policy be? What lessons we can learn from industry, which has a longer history of PPE use in many ways. And then also talk about some of the issues around sustainability that Paul was just speaking in the previous presentation. But before we go on, just because this is the after lunch session, and I know some of you will be flagging, can I ask everyone just to stand up very briefly for me? And can I ask you to remain standing if you've been regularly using FFP3 masks and other respirators during the last 2 years? And can I ask you to stay standing if you were using FFP3 masks and other respirators three or more years ago, so prior to the pandemic? On a regular basis. So I think one of the things that shows is that the widespread use of FFP3s has become increasingly more so due to the pandemic. And I think one of the impacts on that is some of our thinking around healthcare policy on this is still got some catching up to do. But what I'm going to do now is just give you a brief introduction to Globus and who we are. So you just play the video, please.
Shetland, a remote group of islands at the furthest tip of the UK. It was here 25 years ago that a small entrepreneurial business making gloves for salmon farmers began. Today, the Globus Group supplies 90 countries and protects everyone, from oil riggers to frontline medics. That's more than a quarter of a century dedicated to looking after people's safety.
This has not happened overnight. This is 25 years of hard work, continuous innovation, development of product, development of people, development of how we support our customers and listen to what they have to say.
When the pandemic struck, Globus was well placed to respond. And it's been at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19 ever since.
We're a business that likes to do things differently. We like to do things in a way that expresses fearless innovation.
We've always had agility.
We've always been able to provide solutions for customers.
It felt like, we need to fix a problem in the United Kingdom. Let's just go and fix it.
There was a massive sense of national emergency. We had doctors, nurses phoning, visiting the factories, crying, asking us to help them. It was absolutely heartbreaking.
Prior to the pandemic, Globus had always planned to concentrate its manufacturing in the UK.
The position that we were in meant we had to just bring that plan forward. We had to accelerate it.
We were repurposing our factory within, a matter of days and manufacturing 5,000 visors a day. And then I think within a week or two, we were upping that to 20,000.
We simply had to create new products, create new machines, employ hundreds and hundreds of people, build 2 factories, build all the infrastructure around it, build all the regulatory, all the quality control, all the logistics.
More money was going out the door than was coming in at that point in time. The risk of that was taken by the company.
And there were times where I thought, what have we done? Times where I thought we weren't going to make it.
Everybody stepped up massively. Everybody came together. And the true family values of the company really shone through.
I think about 90% of people said, we'll come to work even if you don't pay us. Yeah, it is. It makes me emotional now. They were genuinely putting themselves at risk to help.
The way I look at it is, if obviously we've been doing our bit for the NHS,
because of the current situation the country's in with this global pandemic?
I started in November. My husband started. I've got my son, my daughter. I've got a lot of family in here. About 8 in my family altogether.
Today, Globus is the biggest PPE manufacturer based in the UK. 4 new factories, creating jobs in northwest England and Scotland. And 75% of products are to be made in this country.
It's amazing ingenuity that comes from people under times of great pressure. We have a fantastic manufacturing platform with fantastic capacity. We have tremendous resilience, and the UK need never be starved of product again.
With the UK better prepared and better protected, Globus is embarking on a new chapter. It's reaching out to other countries, offering them their own sustainable solutions. Already, the company's manufacturing in Germany and will expand far beyond.
We now are very much design, research and development and technology led, and we really see harnessing technology as how we're going to solve the problems that the nation has. We've got raw material production, we have R&D on new materials to make more sustainable raw materials, use less plastic, biodegradable plastics. We're working on recycling initiatives and recycling solutions. We have a huge pipeline of new product that will improve people's safety, improve their comfort, and without being melodramatic, improve their lives.
So I just want to show that video partly to introduce the company to you, but also to help us all sort of cast our minds 2 years ago and think of sort of the chaotic situation at the beginning of the pandemic. And a lot of that chaos was focused around PPE, with a whole host of countries competing for supply, just as the supply chain was collapsing. And what that meant, obviously, was prices went through the roof, and the ability to get proper PPE, as the government turned to companies and individuals who didn't necessarily have the expertise and history in PPE. Sure, we had non-compliant products, which we're still sort of dealing with the outcomes today. So we spoke previously about what Globus did in response to that pandemic. It's about accelerating the existing plans to reshore manufacturing, with 75% of products made for the NHS now made in the UK. We've built the 3 new factories, one in Dumfries, 2 in Dumfries and 1 in Warrington. One of the great advantages of building here, of course, is it shortens and strengthens the supply chain. So as previously, you had a 6,000-mile supply chain, and boats were coming in from Taiwan with PPE that the government had committed and paid for, but other people were starting to bid against that as the boats are in the water, which caused significant problems. So now the supply chain from our Warrington factory to here is less than 100 miles, and obviously there's no one competing with the NHS for that product. Created 1,000 jobs we spoke about, but also we're proud of the additional benefits that brings to the local economy. Not just the people we employ, but the UK supply chain that we use, the UK engineering firms that help our factories keep running, and indeed the UK-based firms that build those factories. And that all becomes part of what we like to call this cashback initiative, whereby money spent in UK-based companies, the money doesn't disappear from the UK economy, it stays and bounces around. And if you're around later and you want to come and speak to us about some of that philosophy, or if you're at the dinner tonight, which we're sponsoring, please do come speak to us about that as an idea. I just want to touch on another couple of additional benefits that you may not think about when you think about why UK manufacturing can be so important. Well, this is the NHS Audit Scotland's report into PPE, their official report they put out in the middle of last year. And there's a few things to pick up on. First of all, obviously, this is Scotland, which is a much smaller market than the rest of the UK for the NHS. But that huge spike from 100 masks, FFP3 masks a week to 120,000 shows the real significant impact that the pandemic had on mask use. And then the other thing is this huge fluctuation, and I want to point out this is the average price, not the price that necessarily that Globus was charging, which is significantly below this. But you had 75p for one Type 2R mask at one point, and £5.27 for the cost of one FFP3. And much as that was about up to £1.50 was literally the cost, the individual cost per mask of flying that in during the height of the pandemic. So again, if you have a UK-based system, you know, during times of normalcy, for want of a better word, a UK-based company like Globus that pays above the living wage won't be able to compete with Asian manufacturers necessarily. But it does give you that continuity of supply and that idea around price stability as well. And Mark, I'm going to hand over to you for this next bit.
Thank you, Will. We have an abundance of masks now and PPE in the country, but the whole world 2 years ago, pre-COVID, were drawing from China and Taiwan to get their PPE. And to add to that, there was Chinese philanthropists that were also trying to purchase stock back from companies like ourselves and our competitors to send back to their country to help with their staff, which we were unaware of at the time. So we work closely with the NHS supply chain and a number of NHS trusts just to keep supply of two of our masks. You may have heard of it, the Alpha S and the 3030. It's a very good, small-fitting face mask. One of my accounts, Soundwells in Birmingham, they were using 2,000 per month. In the peak of the pandemic, it was 48,000. And trying to get this stock into the country, we then had to start to fly stock in addition to what was being bought over by the ships. And believe it or not, we're paying £1.50 per mask just to come on the planes, to come across. And then just to sort of add to the UK and NHS pressure in 21, I don't know if you remember the Evergreen ship that was stuck in the Suez Canals. We've got Alpha S's 3030 sitting in there. We've also got stock sitting in other ships behind. So then a £1.50 flight turns into a £2.50 flight to try and get stock. And it's not a case of just ringing the forwarding agent and saying, yeah, can you sort that out? Our government's in dialogue with their government. We're told it's going to come on the Friday. The nurses are all ready. You know, they're going to get their masks. They don't need to be refit tested. It doesn't come. It then comes certain days. So it was a wake-up call for us and also for the NHS that supply resilience needs to be much stronger.
Thanks, Mark. And I think one of the other points about being in the UK and how it can drive innovation, we now have the people designing the masks based in the same building as the people building the masks. So what that means is, obviously, that loop of how to design a quicker mask more effectively is much closer. So you would have heard, if you were in the presentation earlier, you would have heard Paul Chivers talk about our clear mask, which was designed and built in the same building. And again, it just really helps to get that quicker innovation. You're not trying to send samples back and forth to different countries. Mark,
Sure. I mean, this was really to do with what the Cambridge study has shown us within wearing FFP mask versus Type 2R mask. And why did Soundwells go from 2,000 a month to 48,000 per month? Because the FFPs, once they're fit tested properly, actually work, and they can be disposed of.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the really interesting things about this Cambridge study was that at the beginning you had the COVID wards and the non-COVID wards, and while the healthcare staff in the COVID wards were all being given FFP3s, some of the ancillary staff who were moving between the two would sit on Type 2Rs. And this is one of the things that this study showed is you need to look to protect everyone. So all these sorts of things start to lead into questions around what should the long-term policy be. And I think there's a reason that Cambridge University only did their study into what is the best protection against this during the middle of the pandemic, because before the pandemic we didn't think there was a need for any study on the best sort of respirators. So on the one hand, we now know an FFP3 will protect you, but on the other hand, even us as a PPE company, we're not going to say that everyone all the time should be wearing FFP3s. No, certainly not sitting at home watching Coronation Street, everyone in the family wearing FFP3. We look around today, some of you are wearing masks, some of you aren't, but very, very few people I've seen today are wearing the full FFP3 protection. And there's a reason for that. It's not wonderfully comfortable. You can make it as comfortable as you can, but it's still not going to be as comfortable as not wearing one. And then, of course, there's the additional costs. Even though we can bring the cost down, there's still the financial costs, and there's obviously the environmental costs of all disposable masks. So what this means is there needs to be a balancing act between no masks and FFP3 masks the whole time. Where do we draw that? And I think that's one of the things we're so keen to come along to events like today, because we've been engaging with industry for 25 years on these sorts of problems, making respirators and other products specifically for industry. And now we feel it's the time to really come engage with healthcare professionals and work out what is it that healthcare professionals need, what type of masks, what should they look like, what should the policies be. Then we can start to react to that in the same way that we used to react to industry. But certainly we don't feel it's our place to set that policy.
And some of the lessons that we've learned from industry is that pre-COVID, there's greater rules in a sandwich shop than there is in going into an NHS hospital. And, people wear PPE for making your iPhone so that they can get top dollar for that. But are we looking after our staff? We have all nationalities that work within the NHS, and we've been involved with some of the BAME studies, and Filipinos, Bangladeshis, African staff, they all have issues because we're all trying to wear the same mask to fit everybody. And that's what we've learned the most of, is that one mask does not fit all. So we are working, and 80% of our market now is female. In industry, predominantly, it's males. It's 6'6", it's oil and gas, it's chemical protection. So that, after what's happened, you will see a considerable change, not only with just masks, with eyewear, everything that's done, because predominantly it is made for men.
I think one of the important things to say, particularly as we come to the end of what may be sort of the first wave, or whatever you how to describe it, of the pandemic. And at the beginning, it was all about saving lives. Now we can see the real impact of staff absence. So it still is obviously important to protect individuals, but to what extent is it moving from protecting individuals to protecting the institution of the NHS itself, and how to reduce these staff absences. So we're currently around 30,000 staff off in the NHS with COVID as we speak. And we're actually doing a study with York University to look at what wider impact that has, the impact on some of these wider costs that you don't necessarily think of, beyond staff absence, but also we know that patients who get COVID when they're in hospital will have a longer stay, so it affects the patient pathway, even if they don't necessarily get seriously ill. So some of these other things. And sorry, if anyone has any questions, we're happy to take them. Anything springs to mind, please stick your hand up as we go through, but we're also going to leave time at the end as well. One of the reasons that this is so important is, we know that the pandemic has had a significant impact on waiting times. And if you think back 3 years ago, it's not as if no one thought the waiting times were a problem 3 years ago. They were already significantly up on where they were 10 years before. And so we now know that some hospitals, I was reading in the NHS Confederation, aren't doing 20% of their elective surgery, so they're running at 80% capacity when it comes to elective surgery because of the impact of staff absence. And the real problem there is it's not as if the NHS has to get back to 100% of where it was. It needs to get back to beyond 100% if it's going to clear the backlog, particularly the figures in gold for those of you it's tricky to see. That's people who've been waiting more than a year, which is obviously significantly shot up during the pandemic. So how can you clear that? And the analogy I sort of think of is, at the moment, it's a bit like you're trying to run, but you're dragging a tyre behind you. So how can you reduce the size of that tyre that is staff absence so you can run that little bit faster? And there's another impact that, and another cost that PPE use has, and that's obviously the environmental question. So we know the NHS is committed to be net zero on its carbon footprint plus, which is not necessarily the things it directly controls, but includes PPE use. And when it made this commitment, PPE wasn't a significant issue when it came to the environmental commitments, because, you know, looking back to the slides and thinking about how much of it was being used. But we know now, we're not quite sure how much PPE there is in the NHS system, but we know that the Department of Health alone distributed 82 million FFP3 masks and 1.25 billion Type 2Rs. So that's, again, that wasn't something that was, when the NHS set its ambitious target of reaching net zero, this wasn't something that it had factored in. So we really need to try and be part of the solution there. And that's what we're doing. We're, you know, like all companies, we've got a net zero ambition. We think ours is particularly ambitious. We aim to be net zero by 2027. So that's only 5 years away now. One of the important things for us to do is to recognise that we are part of the problem. We do make a plastic product that currently is almost is mostly single use. So how can we adapt to that? And so first thing to do is slashing our carbon footprint. We've done some of that already by the UK manufacturing. That obviously shortens our supply chain significantly, but also gives us control over what energy we use, where we get our energy from. We're also looking to design net zero products, and one of the things that we've done is taken control over our raw materials. So we're now using 50% less plastic in the mask than we were 2 years ago, because we've got control over that raw materials. We can make it to our standard rather than trying to buy raw materials, which also obviously has an impact on the robustness of that supply chain, because it's all well and good if you manufacture masks in the UK, but if you're getting the raw materials from China still, when the raw materials run out, you just can't make your masks. And the third one, we think possibly the most exciting, is this idea of building a circular economy. And so that's something that we're really proud of, and I'm going to move on to now. So we've got this ambition of have 50% of our customers recycling their PPE by 2027, and I'll just talk you through the process. So obviously it starts with us manufacturing it, and I've spoken a bit about how because we're designing our own raw materials, we're using less plastic there. It goes to the customer. In this case, it's the NHS. We look to collect it after use, and I'll come on to a bit about that in the next slide. Separate it out, and then use techniques to create new valuable materials. Part of that is energy, so you can turn in the chemical process you create energy, but you can also create new raw materials, some of which can be used to make PPE again, some of which can be used to make other plastic products, a plastic chair, a plastic surgical clog, or plastic matting for a children's play area, things like that. And this is where it's really important to combine the theoretical and the practical know-how. So the theoretical side, we're working with Heriot-Watt University at the moment on this pyrolysis process. Now, it's relatively simple to use pyrolysis to turn old PPE into raw materials, new raw materials. But the problem is you need to get that as high quality as you can, otherwise the plastic will degrade very quickly. And soon, rather than getting several uses, you maybe only get 1 or 2 uses out of that. So we're trying to develop the process where we have this excellent, we get really high quality secondary use material. And the other project is something that we're expecting to be announced literally later today, and that's working with Imperial. And I know in the previous presentation, those of you who were here were talking about some of the difficulties of recycling PPE. We, as I said before, we work in quite a few industries, and there it's relatively simple. We work with an aerospace company, and their safety glasses, everyone, when they're finished with them, there's a bin in their changing room, and they just get popped in. We can collect those relatively simply. It's much more complicated. A hospital, one single hospital, is a much more complicated place than a single factory. Then you think about how many different parts of, how many hospitals and other buildings there are in one trust, and how many trusts there are in the NHS, which is why we want to work with, we're working with Imperial to work out some of those practicalities on how to do that. Mark, is there anything you were going to say about, particularly around reusable masks and some of the problems about going down that route? Do you want to touch on that now, or?
I wasn't going. I was going to do it later. But yeah.
Okay, well, do you want to do it now, because we're almost at the end, I think. Okay. So, just coming on to the conclusion, and I think we have a vision of what PPE sort of utopia will be, and that's PPE where PPE that works for everyone. It fits everybody and protects everybody. But then importantly, PPE that doesn't have a negative impact on staff and on patients. And that's one of the things we're so proud of with our Clear mask is the ability that it gives people to not just to communicate more easily, but also we got some feedback from a healthcare professional that said this was the first time I'd seen my colleagues smile at work for over a year, because they'd all been wearing masks and I just literally hadn't seen them smile, and I was surprised on that and the difference that made to my day. And then just thinking about the economic cost of PPE, how can we offset that as much as we can so that it becomes as cost neutral as it can be? And then finally, the question of sustainability, how can we make it has as little impact as possible on the environment? So that's the journey that we're sort of embarked upon. I'm not going to say that we're there on any of those things yet, but it's something we're committed to reaching.